avail yourselves of the food. We got a food vendor right over here. Convenient for straddling the lunch hour today. So, more than the proceeds, there. Free and cost. Encourage you to do that. Yeah, I think our products like the headlamp in there today. Okay, draw your attention to out in the circle. First of all, doesn't the American Division color guard look wonderful? And their pipeline drummer are doing a good for us. So let's give them a good look.
And the wind is trying to blow it off. And I'm looking, and the wind is streaming this way. And the Bible verse is John chapter 3, speaking of the Holy Spirit of God. Jesus Christ said, the wind bloweth where it listeth. It is the Spirit of God is sovereign. You can't see the wind, certainly feel the effect of it. You see here outwardly. You're not really. And I pray and I hope this country, in our dark hour, God Almighty will have mercy upon this land. And that will be a great work of God's Spirit. May it begin here. And let's bow together for prayer, please. Our God and our Father, we're thankful we can be in thy presence. Thou art the eternal God, the unchangeable God. With thee there is no variableness nor shadow of turning. Father, thou art the God of Jefferson Davis. Thou art the God of our Confederate ancestors. The cause that they fought for is our cause today. 150 years later, Father, we stand in thy presence, looking to thee, our God, to sustain us and help us, yet with great assurance that the truths that are derived from thy word cannot fail. We know that the victory is certain. We pray for thy blessing upon this gathering. Thy help for each speaker. And Father, that each one will be strengthened and encouraged. And there will be a fresh looking to thee, the true and the living God. We thank you, Father, for every mercy. We pray in Jesus' name. Amen. Amen.
Good morning, Confederates. What a wonderful day to be in the capital of the Confederacy. And to see that sons and daughters from all over the South have come here today. Let's hear it from South Carolina. And I'm not going in order here, I'm doing geographically. Alabama. Mississippi. It's all some. Louisiana. Texas. I knew there's one. North Carolina. Tennessee. Kentucky. All right. Well, I think I got one. And yes, Kentucky was a Confederate state. Virginia. Maryland. Oklahoma. Oh, Georgia. Anybody else? I didn't call your state. Yell now. Oh, I'm sorry. Wait a minute. Florida. I do have an answer. It was the second lieutenant and the third Florida infantry. So let's hear it from Florida. And anybody from Arkansas? Yell from Arkansas. Which one? Oh, I'm sorry. I actually have kinfolk there, and I will say it correctly. Anyone from Missouri? Okay, thank you. And any galvanized from other states of the Southern cause? Okay, well, you never know. We have Indiana Division or Ohio Division. All right, good job. We do have an Illinois Division. They work behind the lines very well. Okay, you know, I'm not going to get a microphone without telling a story. Hopefully you appreciate that. I'm cursed on rental cars. The car parked over there where we started with the New York license plate. Please don't crash it. I went to the Georgia convention one time and had to have a rental car, and they gave me one with a Massachusetts license plate on it. I enjoyed driving through Georgia when I'm in Massachusetts. And so I get here and they give me a New York license plate. The only benefit is I can drive however I want and they'll curse Yankees. Alright, now I'm be serious now. We gather today in the shadow of Robert E. Lee. Southern men have gathered around the shadow of Lee for 150 years, or a little more now. Because Lee does not represent some really unattainable goal. He was a noble man. And he will tell you that he was a sinner and put his faith in Christ, as we all do. We honor Lee because he did a better job of it probably than the rest of us. So the reason we look up to Lee, figuratively and literally, is because he exemplifies what we hope is the best and what we strive to be. So it's an honor to be here at this monument of this great man. And we also went by another great man, Jefferson Davis, which is more in what we're doing today. And we'll explain that later. But first, by the way, y'all can have a seat if you want. Y'all can too if you want. We have some distinguished individuals who we would like to recognize and ask them to bring greetings as our lovely banner fights the headwind for us again. I'd like to there you go. Let's hear it for our flight again. First, I would like to take great pleasure in introducing to you one of our sisters in the cause. I know that my wife is a member of the United Daughters of the Confederacy. This here, every man here whose wife is a member of the UDC. Okay. And we very often are working very, very closely together. So I'm proud to introduce to you Mrs. Floyd M. Townsend, who is the president of the Virginia Division of the United Daughters of the Confederacy.
Good afternoon, sons and daughters. I bring greetings from Mrs. Martha Van Skyke, President General of the United Daughters of the Confederacy, and from the Virginia Division of the United Daughters of the Confederacy. We stand beside you to honor our Confederate heritage and to honor our Confederate ancestors. In this age of political correctness, we have to stand firm in our resolve to tell the true history of the Confederacy and the men and women who live, love, and died. Today is the great day to be a Southerner and to be standing side by side with our brothers and sisters. Stand fast and stand proud.
Thank you. Next, we would like to introduce to you the commander of the Virginia Division, Sons of Confederate Veterans, Commander Michael Ruggs.
Thank you, Commander. On behalf of the 3,000 plus members of the Virginia Division, let me say welcome to the capital of the Confederacy. It is an honor to join you all in the shadow of our greatest son, Robert E. Lee. We, the members of the Virginia Division, Sons of Confederate Veterans, feel that there could be no better time than the sesquicentennial to reaffirm our justifiable pride in Confederate heritage and history. With recent events, including legislation introduced just down the road from here to create a holiday to honor Abraham Lincoln in Virginia, it is quite clear that this may be the sesquicentennial, but that Jefferson Davis's quote made 16 years after the end of the war, the contest is not over, the strife is not ended. It has only entered upon a new and enlarged arena. Still rings true 131 years later. I will point out that that holiday has been killed in committee. Absolutely. As Lieutenant General Stephen D. Lee said, remember, it is your duty to see that the true history of the South is presented to future generations. The charge must be our guiding light, and we must uphold it at all costs. May God bless you all, and may God save the South.
Thank you, Commander. So the bill is killed in committee. I'm not going to make any of the possible jokes there. Now it's my honor to introduce you on the Army of Trans-Mississippi, past commander of the Army of Trans-Mississippi, Paul Gramlin Jr.
Good morning. What a magnificent day to be a Southerner. And just in case if you're unfortunate enough not to be in that category, what a great day to be in the South and to be in Richmond. I would like to thank Richmond and the Virginia Division for sponsoring this event. And I do, on behalf of the Army of Trans-Mississippi, bring you greetings. I would also like to let you know that you possess something that others have been envious for over 150 years. And they also have been trying to take it away from you for 150 years. And that is our Southern pride. They will never, never take that away from us. And I can understand why they're so envious. But I wanted to make this real short, so I'm going to leave you with a thought. What we do when no one is watching is what defines us. And this, ladies and gentlemen, honoring our ancestors, is what we do, regardless if anybody's watching. Thank you, and God save the South.
Thank you, Commander. And on behalf of the Army of Tennessee, from Alabama, aide-de-camp for Commander Strang, Gary Carlisle.
Thank you. I'm the least among the least, but I am greatly honored to bring greetings from the Army of Tennessee for Tom Strang. Isn't it great to be in the capital of our country? Thank you very much. I salute Robert E. Lee.
And now a man that many of you know very well, and many of us have known very well, and have always appreciated knowing him and the work that he does, Commander of the Army we're in, of the Army of Northern Virginia, Commander Frank Ernest.
I can't tell you what it means, the honor to hold the title of the Commander Army of Northern Virginia and stand here, as past Commander McMichael said, in the shadow of the real Army of Northern Virginia, Commander of Army of Northern Virginia. I see some others, including our own Commander-in-Chief Michael Gibbons, who know because he's a past Army commander, Henry Kidd, a past Army commander, Army of Northern Virginia, Bragg Bowling. They know what it means to hold that title. I just want to say to you, and you know, no matter what they say, no matter what they want to call it, no matter what they want to try to make people think, the war that our ancestors fought was nothing more and nothing less than America's second war for independence. The outcome of that war was no less tragic than if King George and his redcoat soldiers had triumphed over George Washington and our colonial ancestors. President Davis said, as been mentioned here, that an issue resolved by conflict is not resolved and will come at another time, at another place. People don't know that today, when they talk of states' rights and individual freedom and unfair taxes, they wouldn't want to believe it, but they're professing the views of our Confederate ancestors. You're right, it is today. And the fact that I look out and see all of you here proves President Davis's words. It is not resolved, and as they, no matter how much they may wish, we will not simply go away until it is. Thank you so much.
Well, it's a beautiful sky today. I hope you all appreciate how we ordered the weather up. It was 80-something yesterday. We have a good flag breeze, but I just noticed something. There's one thing that makes this blue Virginia sky even more beautiful, and that's a sight of a rather large A&B battle flag, if y'all haven't noticed that. I think the fellows back there that have brought it and put it up. Next, I would like to introduce to you to bring greetings. Someone I've personally known and have been friends with for a long time, hard worker, our Lieutenant Commander-in-Chief, Charles Kelly Barrow.
Good morning, compatriots, friends, sons and daughters, and children of the Confederacy. It's a great day to be here. It's a great day. Here we are in the capital of the Confederacy, 150 years later. And during this month, 150 years ago, Jefferson Davis proclaimed to the world the values of American liberties and the commitment to its cause. We are here today to reconfirm that cause and that commitment to liberty that we all hold so dear. Today, many in academia will tell us that our facts are inaccurate. Many liberal theologians will tell us that our hearts are impure, but these people are wrong. They say our cause is lost, but they are wrong. For our cause is not lost, because our cause was never lost. Our cause is still with us today. For we are here today to stand and show the world that we stand for American liberties, and that cause will never die as long as we are here and carry that in our hearts. You, people here today, you are the beacon of hope. You are the remnants of that cause that is still with us today. In 1865, Jefferson Davis wrote to his wife, and I quote, I have sacrificed so much for the cause for the Confederacy that I can measure my ability to make it any future sacrifice required. What is your sacrifice? Are you willing to follow the example of our President Jefferson Davis? I can tell you if we sit back and do nothing, then nothing will be accomplished. And this is the time during the sesquicentennial for us to rise up, take our banner, and proclaim to the world that we will not forget who we are, and we will not forget the liberties that we hold so dear. Jefferson Davis said in his last proclamation in Danville of 1865, and I quote, "Let us not then despond, my countrymen, but rely on the unfailing mercies and protection care of our God. Let us meet the foe with fresh defiance, with unconquered and unconquerable hearts." These words today need to be written on our hearts and our minds, and we need to be carrying these words this day forward. Let us never forget that our noble and our just cause and our ancestors, that they were right, we're right, and will always be right. Let us never forget that we are right today. Stand firm, stand fast. May God bless you. May God save the South. Thank you very much.
Next would be the Commander-in-Chief. Now, he's going to have a longer presentation for us later, but the way that's going to work, it wouldn't really be good to stop and introduce him at that point. So I'm going to ask him to do a greeting, and then you'll see him again later. I appreciate the job that any Commander-in-Chief does. Having done that once myself, I know some of the trials and the tribulations, and I would say I'm very pleased to be whatever help I can be to the current Commander-in-Chief we have, who I think is doing a spectacular job. And so I would like, for at least greetings, and then more later, our Commander-in-Chief, R. Michael Givens.
My heart is entirely too full to tell you how much it stirs me to see all you citizens of the South and all these flags of our country. It moves me to no end. God bless you all for that. You know, we passed the monument of Jefferson Davis on our way in here, and he had his hand out to us as we walked by, as if he was saying to us then, as he said right after the war when he said that we were more cheated than conquered. And we were told that it was a war merely carried on to maintain the Union. Would there have been a surrender had we known what would have happened to us then? Robert E. Lee said after the war, he said that if he had foreseen what would have happened to the South, that he would have cut his way through the mountains toward Appomattox. What has been described as that poster child of Southern activism, Jubal Early said, should not our children know what we fought for? If we cannot have political independence, can we not at least have independence of thought? That is why we're still together. That is why your Southern blood still beats so proudly in your veins. Thank you so much for being here. God bless the South.
Now we come to the part of the program that I guess you would call the presentation. As we know, on February 22nd, 1862, the permanent government of the Confederate States of America was seated, and they inaugurated our first president, Jefferson Davis. That would have been 3 days ago from right now. He was sworn in place of the statue of George Washington. And that's because as we look to Lee, Lee looked to Washington. And we should as well. George Washington, the father of American independence, along with others, and a true believer in original American political thought. An original American political ideology is limited federal government, states' rights, and individual freedom. And people always, when I teach in class, if George Washington had been alive in 1861, I don't believe there's any doubt for whom he would have drawn his sword. He would have drawn his sword for Virginia and the South. In fact, the descendants of those founding fathers overwhelmingly did. Thomas Jefferson's grandson, Patrick Henry's, your own Revolutionary War ancestors, their grandsons, who are your Confederate ancestors, knew exactly what they were doing. That's why many early war pictures you will see of them wearing Revolutionary War style uniforms. This idea of the South struggle being a second American Revolution is not a modern construct among Southern history aficionados. That's what the men said who fought that war. So 3 days after Davis would have been sworn in, his inaugural speech would have been telegraphed and sent across the South. So that's really what we're kind of going to reenact now. All over the South, wherever you're from, people would have gathered in the town squares, and someone would have recited for them the words of their newly permanent president. So what we're going to do is what they did a week afterwards back then. We're going to have various individuals from various southern states reciting for you the speech that Jefferson Davis gave at the Washington Monument 150 years and 3 days ago. Y'all go ahead and line up. We'll start with our Lieutenant Commander Kelly Barrow from Georgia. We'll also have A&B Councilman Gene Hogan from South Carolina. We'll have from Alabama, the Second Lieutenant Commander, I believe, now Division, Gary Carlisle. We'll have the Louisiana Division Commander, David Hill. And of course, our Commander-in-Chief from South Carolina, Michael Gibbons, will give the end of that speech. And you'll hear many of us talking about what we believe and what we're doing, but nobody explained the Confederate cause better than Jefferson Davis did. So we will start with that and Commander Barrow.
Thank you. Fellow citizens, on this the birthday of the man most identified with the establishment of American independence, and beneath the monument erected to commemorate his heroic virtues and those of his compatriots, we have assembled to usher into the existence the permanent government of the Confederate States. Though this instrumental under the favor of divine providence, we hope to perpetuate the principles of our revolutionary fathers, the day, the memory, and the purpose fittingly associated. It is mingling feelings of humility and pride that I appear to take in the presence of the people and before high heaven the oath prescribed as a qualification for the exalted station to which the unanimous voice of the people have called me. Deeply sensible of all that is implied by this manifestation of the people's confidence, I am yet more profoundly impressed by the vast responsibility of the office and humbly feel my own unworthiness. In return for their kindness, I can offer assurance of the gratitude with which it is received, and can but pledge a zealous devotion of every faculty to the service of those who have chosen me as their chief magistrate. When a long course of class legislation directed not to the general welfare, but to the of the northern section of the Union, culminating in a warfare on the domestic institutions of the southern states, when the dogma of a sectional party substitute for the provision of the constitutional compact threatened to destroy the sovereign rights of the states, 6 of those states, withdrawing from the Union, confederated together to exercise their right and perform the duty of instituting a government which would better secure the liberties for the preservation for which that Union was established.
Whatever of hope some may have entertained that a returning of sense of justice would remove the danger from which our rights were threatened and render it possible to preserve the union of the Constitution must now have been dispelled by the malignity and barbarity of the northern states and the persecution of the existing war. The confidence of most hopeful among us must have been destroyed by the disregard they have recently exhibited for the all-time honored bulwark of civil and religious liberties. Bastilles filled with prisons, arrests made among civil present or indicted unduly found, the writ of habeas corpus suspended by executive mandate, a state legislature controlled by the imprisonment of members who avowed principles suggest the federal executive that there might be another added to the list of seceded states. Election held under military threat of power, civilian officers, peaceful citizens, and gentlewomen incarcerated for opinion's sake proclaimed the incapacity of our late associates to administer a government as free, liberal, and human as is established by our common use. For profit of sincerity of our purpose to maintain the ancient institutions, we now point to the Constitution of the Confederacy and the laws enacted under it, as well as to the fact that through all the necessities of an unequal struggle, there has been no act on our part to impair personal liberty or the freedom of speech, of thought, or of the press. The courts have been opened. The judicial system functions fully executed, and every right of the peaceful citizen maintained as secure as if there were no invasion had disturbed our land. The people of the states, now confederated, became convinced that the government of the United States had fallen into the hands of a sectional majority who would pervert that most sacred of all trusts to the destructions of the right which it pledged to protect. They believed that to remain longer in the Union would subject them into continuance of a despairing discrimination, submission to which would be inconsistent with their welfare and intolerant to a proud people. They therefore determined to sever its bonds and establish a new confederation for themselves. The experience instituted by our revolutionary fathers of a voluntary union of sovereign states for the purpose specified in a solemn compact has been perverted by those who, feeling the power and forgetting the right, were determined to respect no law but their own will. The government has ceased to answer the ends by which it obtained and established. To save ourselves from a revolution which in its silent but rapid progress was about to place us under the deposition in numbers and to prevent in spirit as well as in form a system of government we believe to be particularly fitted to our condition and full of promise for mankind. We determined to make a new association composed of states homogeneous in interest, in policy, and in our feeling.
True to our traditions of peace and our love of justice, we sent commissioners to the United States to propose a fair and amicable settlement of all questions of public debt or property which might be in dispute. But the government at Washington, denying our self-government, refused even to listen to any proposals for peaceful separation. Nothing was then left to do but to prepare for war. The first year in our history has been the most eventful in the annals of this continent. A new government has been established and its machinery put in operation over an area exceeding 700,000 miles. The great principles upon which we have been willing to hazard everything that is dear to man have made conquest for us which could have never been achieved by the sword. Our Confederacy has grown from 6 to 13 states, and Maryland, already united to us by hallowed memories and material interest, will, I believe, when able to speak with unstifled voice, connect her destiny with the South. Our people have rallied with unexampled unanimity to support the great principles of constitutional government, with firm resolve to perpetuate by arms the right which they could not peacefully secure. 1 million of men, it is estimated, are now standing in hostile array and waging war along a frontier of thousands of miles. Battles have been fought, sieges have been conducted, and although the contest is not ended, and the tide for the moment is against us, the final result in our favor is not doubtful. The period is near at hand when our foes must sink under the immense load of debt which they have incurred, a debt which in their effort to subjugate us has already attained such fearful dimensions as will subject them to burdens which must continue to oppress them for generations to come. We too have had our trials and difficulties. That we are to escape them in the future is not to be hoped. It was to be expected when we entered upon this war that it would expose our people to sacrifices and cost them much, both of money and blood. But we knew the value of the object for which we struggled and understood the nature of the war in which we were engaged. Nothing could be so bad as failure, and any sacrifice would be cheap as the price of success in such a contest.
But the picture has its lights as well as its shadows. This great strife has awakened in the people the highest emotions and qualities of the human soul. It is cultivating feelings of patriotism, virtue, and courage. Instances of self-sacrifice and of generous devotion to the noble cause for which we are contending are rife throughout the land. Never has the people evinced a more determined spirit than that now animating men, women, and children in every part of our country. Upon the first call, the men flew to arms. Wives and mothers sent their husbands and sons to battle without a murmur of regret. It was perhaps in the ordination of Providence that we were able to be taught the value of our liberties by the price for which we pay for them. The recollection of this great contest, with all its common traditions of glory, of sacrifice and blood, will be the bond of harmony and enduring affection amongst the people, producing unity in policy, fraternity in sentiment, and just effort in war. Nor have the material sacrifices of the past year been made without some corresponding benefits. If the acquiescence of foreign nations in a pretended blockade has deprived us of our commerce with them, it is fast making us a self-supporting and an independent people. The blockade, if effectual and permanent, could only serve to divert our industry from the productions of articles for export and employ it in supplying commodities for domestic use. It is a satisfaction that we have maintained the war by our unaided exertions. We have neither asked nor received assistance from any quarter, yet the interest involved is not wholly our own. The world at large is concerned in opening our markets to its commerce. When the independence of the Confederate States is recognized by the nations of the earth, we are free to follow our interests and inclinations by cultivating foreign trade. The southern states will offer to manufacturing nations the most favorable markets which ever invited their commerce. Cotton, sugar, rice, tobacco, provisions, timber, and naval stores will furnish attractive exchanges. Nor would the constancy of these supplies be likely to be distributed by war. Our Confederate strength will be too great to tempt aggression, and never was there a people whose interests and principles committed them so fully to a peaceful policy as those of the Confederate States. By the character of their productions, they are too deeply interested in foreign commerce wantonly to disturb it. War of conquest they cannot wage. because the Constitution of their Confederacy admits no coerced association. Civil war there cannot be between states held together by their volition only. The rule of voluntary association cannot fail to be conservative by securing just and impartial judgment at home, does not diminish the security of the obligations by which the Confederate States may be bound to foreign nations. In proof of this, it is to be remembered that at the first moment of asserting their right to secession, these states proposed a settlement on the basis of the common liability for the obligations of the central government.
Fellow citizens, after the struggle of ages had consecrated the right of the Englishman to constitutional representative government, our colonial ancestors were forced to vindicate that birthright by an appeal to arms. Success crowned their efforts, and they provided for their posterity a peaceful remedy against future aggression. The tyranny of an unbridled majority, the most odious and least responsible form of despotism, has denied us both the right and the remedy. Therefore, we are in arms to renew such sacrifices as our fathers made to the holy cause of constitutional liberty. At the darkest hour of our struggle, the provisional gives place to the permanent government. After a series of successes and victories which covered our arms with glory, we have recently met with serious disaster. But in the heart of a people resolved to be free, these disasters tend but to stimulate to increased resistance. To show ourselves worthy of the inheritance bequeathed to us by the patriots of the Revolution, we must emulate that heroic devotion that made reverse to them but the crucible in which their patriotism was refined. With confidence in the wisdom and virtue of those who will share with me the responsibility and aid me in the conduct of public affairs, securely relying on the patriotism and courage of the people, of which the present war has furnished so many examples. I deeply feel the weight of the responsibilities I now, with unaffected diffidence, am about to assume, and fully realizing the inequality of human power to guide and to sustain my hope is reverently fixed on Him whose favor is vouchsafed to the cause which is just. With humble gratitude and adjuration, acknowledging the providence which has so visibly protected the Confederacy during its brief but eventful career, to Thee, O God, I trustingly commit myself and prayerfully evoke Thy blessing on my country. So were the words of Jefferson Davis at his second inaugural address, February the 22nd, 1862, here in Richmond, Virginia. Folks, that was 153 days ago. And it confounds people and confuses people. Why do we still stand here today? Well, I'm going to tell you why. And you know exactly why. America is #1 in the world in freedom. Am I correct? Boo! In liberty, America is #1. Am I correct? Boo! Liberty is what our ancestors fought for in the first revolution, and they're what our ancestors died for in the second. Am I right? Slavery! Liberty. America is #1. America has branded its own form of liberty, and that branding came from blood. Let's look at the world that we live in today. Our world is upside down. These are the exact words that was said during the first revolution. It's a world upside down. Today we have the two seats of the cradle of civilization. Greece and Egypt on their heads, completely imploding. The euro, the currency of Europe, is imploding. There's civil wars throughout the world, particularly in the Arab world. They call it the Arab Spring. Jordan is upside down. Tunisia, Yemen, the secession of the southern Sudan. When George Bush was president, George Bush said that those people hated us because of our freedom, because of our liberty. I don't know if they hated us for that or they hated us because we bothered them about theirs. They all wanted their own form of liberty, but America has created its own, and one that is envied throughout the world. Liberty is the American dream. William Wallace, that great Scottish patriot, said, "I tell you true, liberty is the best of all things. Never live beneath the noose of the servile halter." The Oxford Dictionary defines liberty as the state of being free within society from oppressive restrictions imposed by authority on one's behavior or political view. The Encyclopedia Britannica, 11th edition, published in 1911, the best encyclopedia ever written, because it was written with the minds of the 19th century scholars, said of liberty, liberatus. Liberatus is Latin for liberty, says generally the state of freedom, especially opposed to subjugation, imprisonment, or slavery. The dictionary that our ancestors used before they marched off to war, when they learned to read and write in the South, was Walker's Critical Pronouncing Dictionary and Expositor of the English Language. It described liberty as freedom, privilege, immunity, and permission. Liberty, while it's easy to define, is very difficult to define legally. But we Americans can't go very far without seeing or hearing the word liberty. There's the Liberty, the Statue of Liberty. There's the Liberty Bell. There's Liberty Insurance. The Jeep makes a car called the Liberty. There's Liberty University, the Sons of Liberty, the man who shot Liberty Valance. Look in your pocket and pull out a coin. It's probably got Liberty written on it. If you go home today, get on your computer and Google the word liberty, and it'll be countless names, pages after pages of sites that you can go to see liberty. Then Google French liberty. You'll find two hits. One for Mr. Delacroix's painting of Madame Liberty, and the other for the statue that they gave us. Look up Russian liberty. Google Russian liberty and you'll find Radio Free Europe, which was a Western invention. Liberty demands our attention, our full attention. Nothing is more important to that great doctrine of human liberty. 2 Corinthians 3:17 says, "Where the Spirit of the Lord is, there is liberty." Liberty is a gift from God, ladies and gentlemen. It's stamped on our souls of creation, not just for Americans, but all men. But America was born out of a craving to be free and has created its very own unique brand of liberty. Its beginnings were very humble, but they go long back. Into a field at Runnymede in the year of 1215, when the abuses by King John caused a revolt by the nobles who compelled him to execute his recognition of the rights for both noblemen and ordinary Englishmen. It established the principle that no one, including the king or a lawmaker, is above the law. Just ask Bill Clinton. That was the birth of liberty. There's been many actors in the play of liberty throughout the centuries. The modern understanding of liberty as we know it today has certain fundamental and basic rights, goes back to the 17th and 18th century theorists such as Francis Hutchinson and John Locke. Hutchinson wrote that all people are equal and that they possess certain basic rights that are conferred by natural law. Locke reckoned that all individuals are entitled to liberty. He continued to argue that human beings in the state of nature are free and equal, and that when they enter into society, they surrender only such rights that are necessary for their security and the common good. This natural rights theory provided the philosophical basis for both the American and the French revolutions. Now we take this history of liberty on up to the American Revolution. The rights of the colonists were being trampled, and something had to be done. Patrick Henry stood in the church and he made this great impassioned speech that ended with, "Is life so dear or peace so sweet as to be purchased at the price of chains and slavery? Forbid it, Almighty God. I know what course others may take, but as for me, give me liberty or give me death." The Declaration of Independence parroted Locke's natural law theory, stating that all people have inalienable rights. Similarly, the preamble of the Constitution outlines the framers' intent to establish a government structure
that ensures freedom from oppression. The Bill of Rights sets forth a number of specific protections of individual liberties and protections against tyrannical government. Lockean views weighed heavy in Thomas Jefferson's idea that the government that governs best is the government that governs least. Thomas Jefferson also said that when government fears the people, there is liberty. When people fear the government, there is tyranny. We have been taught that liberty was the central principle, the soul of the American Republic, the cornerstone of independence, and secession from the British Crown was liberty. The whole purpose of secession was freedom and liberty. The founding fathers of this great republic put the idea of liberty into every step they took to secure the freedom for the American people. I'd like to read for you the beginning of the Declaration of Independence because the words are incredibly important for us. And they meant everything to the men that we're here to honor today. Declaration of Independence, July 4th, 1776. When in the course of human events it becomes necessary for one people to dissolve the political bonds which have connected them with another, and to assume among the powers of the earth the separate and equal station to which the laws of nature and of nature's God entitle them, a decent respect to the opinions of mankind requires that they should declare the causes which impel them to separation. We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, that they are endowed by their Creator with certain inalienable rights, that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. That to secure these rights, governments are instituted among men, deriving their just powers from the consent of the governed. That whenever any form of government becomes destructive of these ends, it is the right of the people to alter or abolish it, and to institute new government, laying its foundation on such principles and organizing its powers in such form as to them shall seem most likely to affect their safety and happiness. Now, folks, is this merely nationalistic poetry or just a reflection on the culture of the age in which it was developed? Well, we'll see. But the signers didn't see it as simple poetry. The signers had much to lose. As a matter of fact, John Hancock already had a price on his head of about 500 pounds. When he wrote his name so large on that document, he did that purposely so that George III wouldn't have to put his reading glasses on to see exactly who was signing that document. Well, by signing that document, they gave Britain the list of men that they needed to torture and torment. And that's what happened to those men. They knew how serious their sacrifice was going to be. Stories of harassment and torture abound for those people. The framers fought hard for this idea that we live under with liberty, for themselves and for us and future generations. Then came the French Revolution. Here's something different. The French Revolution is clearly one of the central events of Western civilization. The Revolution of 1789 was a revolt against the power of the monarch and aristocracy. The motto was liberty, equality, and fraternity. And its end was social justice. Its means were established the sovereignty of the people and to eliminate social and political inequalities. The more moderate American Revolution, by comparison, was much less influential upon the world, even though it was more successful and less bloody. The French Revolution was actually a failure in sense of what they were trying to do. In a little over 20 years, once again, there was a Bourbon sitting on the seat of the throne. But the conception of the French Revolution is clearly different from the ideals of the American revolutionaries. For the Americans, freedom was to be preserved against the state. For the French, the state was to be used to achieve their own form of social justice, or their idea of social justice. For the Americans, individual rights were essential to protect interests. For the French, the collective, the sovereignty of the people, the general will stood above individual rights. For the French elite, seemed to think that they knew what was best for the people, and that always leads to murderous, tyrannical situations. Liberté, égalité, fraternité was the French motto, but that was quickly overshadowed by the towering figure of Maximilien Robespierre and his reign of terror as the revolution spun out of control and began to murder itself. The French Revolution became an exercise in anarchy and nihilistic terror. It was violently anti-Christian. Voltaire predicted it when he said with greatest satisfaction in 1773, he said, "In 20 years there will be nothing left of the church." And folks, 23 years later in 1793, that marked the year of the terror, the year when the French Revolution ended the Christian era. Robespierre was the new god of France. The French Revolution certainly left its mark on history. In that sense, it was certainly no failure. If imitation is the sincerest form of flattery, then at least the cruelty of the French Revolution is well flattered. Arnold Toynbee, in his A Study of History, saw the French Revolution as the point in our civilization when it stopped growing and started breaking down. Robespierre was a Jacobin. He was the deputy of the Committee of Public Safety, and he was the Lord of Terror. He attempted to silence all the enemies of the revolution in an effort to save France. Sounds like save the Union. The true number of his victims during the reign of terror is unknown, but the number is in the tens of thousands, including the head of King Henry Louis XVI. During one ferocious stretch of merciless revolutionary madness, 1,376 individuals were guillotined in only 47 days. Madame Jeanne Roland de la Platre's last words before her death on the guillotine were, "Oh, liberty, how they have played with you." Robespierre was a terrorist. Robespierre made an address to the French National Convention in 1794 where he said, "Terror is only just as prompt, severe, and inflexible. It is then an emanation of virtue." His reign was short, but his tactics and his influence would be felt from then until now. Robespierre was perhaps the first European intellectual to put forth this idea that terror is the best and most effective manner for bringing about justice. Later that year, Robespierre would suffer the same fate as many of his victims when he took his own turn at the guillotine. But he left a heritage that was to be mimicked by every despotic tyrant from then until now. Prince Peter Kropotkin, a Russian naturalist and author and soldier, writing in the 1909 on the eve of the Bolshevik Revolution, said, "What we learn from the study of the Great French Revolution is that it was the source of all the present communist, anarchist, and socialist conceptions." Antoine Fouquier Tinville was the attorney that prosecuted nearly all the victims of the guillotine during the terror. In December 1917, when Lenin founded the first Soviet secret police that later became the KGB, he asked, "Where will we find our Fouquier Tinville?" Folks, we've looked at two ideas. One of a natural realm of competing interests between happiness and justice, with an outcome of ordered liberty, and the other of social justice achieved through the state. Those of the American Revolution were of checks and balances, were of rights and limited government. Those of the French were exactly the opposite. Since 1793, France has had no less than 11 subsequent constitutions, while the United States is still working under its first. So what does all this talk of liberty and revolution have to do with the men that we come here today to honor and remember? What does it have to do with all the men and women and families that suffered at the hands of the invaders from the north? Well, folks, the French Revolution marked the beginning of the modern totalitarian government and large-scale executions of, quote, enemies of the people, unquote. This legacy would inspire Nazi Germany, the Chinese, Cambodian, and Russian communists. French revolutionary Robespierre has been compared to Hitler, Stalin, Mao, Saddam Hussein, and Abraham Lincoln. Mr. Lincoln's revolution parallels the French, not the American Revolution. Did Lincoln study Washington or Robespierre? Did he study Jefferson? What the fuck we are doing? In a speech in Springfield, Illinois, In 1854, Lincoln seemed to confuse the language of the American Declaration of Independence with the French Declaration of the Rights of Man, which was a fundamental document of the French Revolution that has been referred to in almost every single revolutionary movement since 1789. He said, and I quote, "The theory of our government is universal freedom. All men are created free and equal, says the Declaration of Independence," unquote. Lincoln repeated this mistaken formula on July 4th, 1856, again attributing the phrase, "all men are born free and equal," to the Declaration of Independence. It's not where it came from. It's verbatim from the Rights of Man. George Washington and the framers of the Constitution understood a true idea of unionism, one based on the principles of self-restraint, moderation, compromise, and institutional checks on appetite. It preserved constitutional government and limited power. Lincoln, on the other hand, destroyed constitutional government, preferring a false form of unionism, one that was driven by a lust for domination. With the Constitution bending under the strain of the manipulations of the North, the South chose to reconstruct the original constitutional order with the hopes to preserve the more authentic constitutionalism based upon the founders' principles of ordered liberty. That was exactly what Jefferson Davis was talking about in the speech you just heard. This is why the Confederate Constitution so closely resembles the American Constitution. This is why we use as our symbol for the Confederacy George Washington in the center of the seal of the Confederacy. But drunk with power and fueled by a war state, Lincoln edged closer, dangerously closer to despotism. The list of Lincoln's maneuvers is long. Declaring a state of rebellion, he suspended the writ of habeas corpus. He declared martial law. He demanded control of the state police. Declared a blockade. Seized property, abridged freedom of the press. Through an unprecedented use of proclamations and executive orders, he became, in effect, the legislature of one. The Confederate soldier, and most assuredly the men of whom we descend and honor here today, fought assuredly for the cause of liberty. The Northern ruled Congress had passed laws increasing tariffs to pay for internal improvements. These improvements were road and rail systems in the North. But the capital to fund these projects came from the sweat and the toil of the Southerners. You understand why they needed these rails and why they needed these roads? Here in the sunny South, we have a long fall line. The fall line is where the rivers have their waterfalls. In the North, they're right at the ocean. In order for the people to take their products to the market, they would have to have the rail system. And who was to pay for it? The Southerners. They needed these so-called improvements to compete with the South agriculturally, but it amounted to nothing more than that. The reasons the South left the Union were as plentiful as the reasons that the American colonies left the repressive rule of Great Britain, and equally justified. But instead of attempting a diplomatic solution to settle disputes, Lincoln chose to wage the most internecine war in the history of America. Mr. Lincoln didn't always hold these views, though, folks. In 1848, he said this, and I quote, "Any people anywhere being inclined and having the power have the right to rise up and shake off the existing government and force a new one that suits them better. This is a most valuable and a most sacred right, a right which we hope and believe is to liberate the world. Nor is this a right confined to the cases in which the whole people of an existing government may choose to exercise it. Any portion of such people that can may revolutionize and make their own of such territory as they inhabit." What? Really? Something happened in 13 years to change Lincoln's worldview. On April 15, 1861, the day after the sovereign Republic of South Carolina had reclaimed its property in Charleston Harbor, Lincoln called for 75,000 troops to invade and subdue them of their God-given rights. At that time, the North was weak. was divided on many issues. In fact, the United States at that moment had less than 12,000 regular Army troops, with less than 3,000 available on the East Coast. They had a small and widely scattered Navy. The government was basically bankrupt, such that even the Congress couldn't be paid at the time. But yet, Lincoln still calls for 75,000 troops to come to South Carolina and kill people to quell the rebellion and save the Union. This call to action was what participated the main support of the South. A number of states wished to remain in the Union until they were ordered to be a part of coercing another state, such as Virginia. Virginia wouldn't have gone if Lincoln hadn't decided that he would kill people. But Lincoln could taste the blood at that point, and there was no turning back. Northern states began complying with Lincoln's demands to supply their militias. Troops began making their way to Washington. Massachusetts troops passed through Baltimore, Maryland. This is something special for the guys from Maryland. When the Massachusetts troops passed through Baltimore, Maryland on April the 19th, when they were exiting town, they found their tracks to be blocked. The soldiers were halted by citizens with pistols and rocks. An altercation ensued, resulting in the death of 4 of those invaders and 9 Maryland defenders, while dozens more were wounded. The troops eventually got through to Washington and were quartered in the Senate chamber of the Capitol building. The Baltimore city government disabled the bridges through Baltimore. The Marylanders had sealed off Washington from the outside. Lincoln later described his dire situation as this, and I quote, "All the roads and avenues of this city are obstructed, and the Capitol was put into the condition of a siege. The mails in every direction were stopped, and the lines of the telegraph were cut off by the insurgents. And the military and naval forces which had been called out by the government for the defense of Washington were prevented from reaching the city by organized and combined treasonable resistance in the state of Maryland. There was no adequate and effective organization for the public defense. Congress had been indefinitely adjourned." Sound like a pretty good idea. So what to do about the so-called traitors in Maryland? Lincoln was in a panic. If Virginia and Maryland both were to side with the South, Washington would be surrounded. It would be over before it began. So Lincoln wrote to General Winfield Scott, and he said that the Maryland legislature assembles tomorrow and not probably will take action to arm the people of that state against the United States. He then went on to ask General Scott to move, if necessary, to the bombardment of their cities and to the suspension of the writ of habeas corpus. Folks, he told his top general to go ahead and bomb one of his own cities. Maryland had not seceded, so he said, go ahead and bomb the city. This greed for conquest having an intoxicating effect on the citizens north of the 39th parallel turned a long-standing disdain of their siblings to the south into a shameful display of domination. For Lincoln's party, it was a glorious revolution. His war raged on for 4 long years and wreaked havoc on both sides, robbing the respective countries of their talents, friendship, and love of over 620,000 souls by the end of the war, and upwards to 1 million a few years after due to complications of wounds and disease. But just killing soldiers is never enough for a tyrant. Many suffered and died in the prisons of the North. And it wasn't just soldiers that Lincoln imprisoned. Many citizens were jailed with no charge given and no court hearing. During the French Revolution, the image of the Goddess of Liberty was erected over the state guillotine. In Lincoln's Revolution, men were drugged from their homes and plunged into vermin-infested dungeons in the name of the cause of freedom and restoring the Union. This is why we still remember this, folks. Those who, under Robespierre, were destined for imprisonment or arrest were registered under the name of Mr. Blank, arrested as a measure of general security. Folks, this is the very language that was used by Lincoln's lieutenants for his illegal seizures of private citizens that did not toe the party line. Hitler, Stalin, Mao and Hussein studied from the same playbook to horrific effect. Lincoln crowned his mischief further with total war, waging war on the citizens of the South. In the French Revolution, à la guillotine went shouting across France in the name of liberty. In the Lincoln Revolution, murder, theft, and arson went shouting over the land in the name of justice and liberty. Such is the contradiction in the conduct of bad men. They wonder why we remember. The South didn't ask for war. The perpetration of the war was neither for slavery nor for secession. It was invasion. It was a war of self-defense. Whenever they say the war was about slavery, remind them that the war wouldn't have happened if there had been no invasion. It was a war of invasion, a war of self-defense. Now I ask you, is self-defense a part of this idea of natural law and natural liberty that we spoke of at the beginning? Self-defense. It's been contended by some that when we enter into society, the natural right of self-defense is surrendered to the government. Was that right given up when our ancestors joined the Union? Do we today have the right to defend ourselves from invasion? Of course. If you are assaulted or threatened with immediate personal danger, the law of the land does not require you to wait upon the strong but slow arm of government for your protection. On the contrary, thanks to the Lord and the Second Amendment of the United States Constitution, you are permitted to protect yourself, to repel force by force. And this, ladies and gentlemen, is basic liberty. Therefore, in this sense, no man's natural liberty is abridged by the state, nor was the natural liberty of the South abridged during the War for Southern Independence. But regardless, as hard as our people fought, while certain civilized nations flirted with the idea, no one came to the aid of the fledgling Confederacy, and she lost her bid for self-determination and therefore liberty. The war was followed by so-called Reconstruction, admitting the states, or rather readmitting the states, stripping them of statehood and forcing them under martial law to accept the will of the oppressor. So much for the consent of the government. When Alex de Tocqueville came to America and viewed what was happening with democracy and went back to France and published his book called Democracy in America in 1835, he said this. He said, "I am not so much alarmed at the excessive liberty which reigns in that country as to the inadequate securities which one finds there against tyranny." Our own compatriot Dr. Donald Livingston once remarked, what we call civil war was in fact America's French Revolution, and Lincoln was the first Jacobin president. So, where does this metamorphosis of American liberty leave us today? Is liberty still the central principle and the soul of the American Republic? I ask you now, are we still number one in the world? Folks, the Heritage Foundation gets together with the Wall Street Journal every year and they make a list where they rank countries by economic liberty and other types of liberty. In 2009, the Heritage Foundation and the Wall Street Journal listed the United States of America at number 6 in the world in economic freedom. Economic freedom is perhaps the most important freedom we have because it allows you to have a business and do trade without too many regulations. In 2009, we were 6th. 2012, we are 10th. We are 10th in the world in economic freedom. According to worldaudit.org, we are 15th in the world in democratic freedom. If you listen to our pundits today, we invented democracy. We are 15th in the world. In 2009, according to Reporters Without Borders, we were listed as 20th in freedom of press. The press is here today. How do you feel about that? 20th in 2009. Folks, in 2012, we're now listed 47th. What has happened? what has happened indeed. Well, recently Congress passed the National Defense Authorization Act. You can't trust any of them, folks. 190 Republicans and 93 Democrats voted successfully to allow the military the right to imprison you indefinitely without your right to trial. Mr. Lincoln's dream was presented to President Obama and signed into law on December 31st, 2011. It essentially suspended the writ of habeas corpus once again. So today, folks, as we come here 150 years after Jefferson Davis made that immortal speech, defining once again America's brand of liberty, I'll leave you to ponder for yourselves what's left of the legacy of American liberty, what the future might hold. Can Americans today distinguish between Maximilian Robespierre and Thomas Jefferson? Between Abraham Lincoln and Jefferson Davis? Can they? No. Are they able to tell the difference between an internecine Holocaust and a legal resistance to tyranny? Between a Marxist war of oppression and a defense of Christian liberty? If not, we don't deserve the liberty that was won for us by the blood sacrifice of our ancestors. If pondering this question brings you to the conclusion that the American dream is becoming just that, a dream, then we need to find a way to recover the conditions that make authentic constitutionalism possible again. Essential to any such renewal must involve an honest reckoning with the past, and that's not just you and me, that's everybody out there. We've all got to be honest about this. An acknowledgement of the points of departure from Jeffersonian democracy and a determination to prepare courageous leadership for a resurrection of that original brand of American liberty that is so much the envy of the rest of the world, whether we have it or not. God bless the South and the indomitable cause for liberty. Thank you very much.
You suck!
Thanks, Commander. One more time, I would like to bring up Commander Edward Ray, who is the main man responsible for putting all this together for us. He would like to thank some other folks.
I have a right to be here, just like you do, asshole.
Oh, you're a prickly, dickless piece of shit.
I don't care.
Why would you be out here?
Remiss if I had not,
because I live in Richmond.
I do too. To the Richmond City Police and the Virginia Capitol Police who are here.
I don't give a shit, man. I have a right to say whatever I want.
And the protection of our monuments.
You're a dickless piece of shit.
Well, it takes one to know one.
Thank you also to the Department of Virginia Department of General Services.
Officer, he's harassing me.
Without whose
We're just having a little discussion. Obviously, if he says he sucks, it's my obligation to tell him how brutally this prick sucks. So I'm giving that right as well.
You made your point.
But you keep your mouth shut, boy.
I'm not going to keep my mouth shut. I have a right to speak.
You don't have a right to do shit.
Yes, I do. I sure do.
So then I got a right to get up in your face and tell you you're a dickless piece of shit.
For us to restore the afternoon and evening.
You're too young to know about your freedoms, boy.
I'm not. Fuck you. I have a right to say that.
I have a right to kiss my honky white ass.
Yeah, you're a white supremacist. You suck.
I'm not a white supremacist. I like my Constitution.
Yeah,
you communist prick.
Confederate Chapel.
I'm not a communist.
Obviously, you are.
No, I'm not.
You're putting health care.
Anti-capitalist. Yeah, I like health care.
Oh, you don't like capitalism?
No.
Well, then go the fuck to communism.
You go away. I'm trying to
You
change
take
the
your
system.
social. God, this nation's not built on socialism, boy.
And then it's just 3 or 4 blocks.
Next time you go buy that fucking camera, go get it from a socialist society and see what good it does you.
All right.
Yes, turn left.
Thanks,
at
genius.
Stonewall Jackson Monument. Yes, I'm reminded that you can't turn left if you're in a vehicle. So, but somehow make your way left either before or after the Jackson Monument. And then finally, one other thing. I see a lot of cameras today
anyone with still cameras, and particularly those who are taking any video images, if you could contact either me or Commander Michael, we'd be very interested in seeing what you come up with.
Put someone fuss
and then one more reminder, please visit our vendors of food over here and the commemorative medals and the book behind you. And finally, please plan to return to Richmond to the Jefferson Davis Memorial Service scheduled for Saturday, 2nd of June. This is the National Memorial Service honoring President Davis, and it will be held at his grave site in Hollywood Cemetery. Thank you, and if I can be of any service, please don't hesitate to contact me, and thank you again for coming, and have safe travel back home.
I thought you might be
Okay, we have two final pieces of very important business to wrap up this year's sesquicentennial event, recognizing that the Confederate soldiers were patriots. And the traitors were the ones in Washington, D.C.
Still
on! Over there. Okay. We will have the invocation, and then we'll have Commander Simpson lead us, and we'll just call it the Song of the South.
Better wise up, huh?
Let us pray. Our Father, we're so thankful to be in thy presence, acknowledging thy goodness, the liberty that we have in our souls. We're thankful for the Savior, said it, Son, set you free, you shall be free indeed. We're thankful, Father, for this gathering and the blessing of being able to look afresh at our ancestors, at the heritage, at the valor, at the courage, Father, at the great liberty that they fought to preserve. We pray that it will be deep in our souls to stand true for the same cause, to be valiant in today's great time of adversity. We thank thee that we can call upon thy name and trust in thee, that thou art the eternal God. We pray in Jesus' name, amen.
We've heard some impassioned speech today and some great words, and I'm being told to wait a minute.
Gentlemen, up and to your post. Shoulder your flags and present your arms as we are led by Commander Simpson and our beloved Dixie.
Oh, I wish I was in the land of cotton, old times there are not forgotten. Look away, look away, look away, Dixieland. In Dixieland where I was born, early on a frosty morning. Look away, look away, look away, Dixieland. Then I wish I was in Dixie. Hooray, hooray. In Dixieland I'll take my stand to live and die in Dixie.
Away, away, away down south in Dixie. Away, away, away down south in Dixie. Enjoy that, Willis. I sure would like to
See you all at next year's event at Beauvoir on the lovely Mississippi Gulf Coast, where we will dedicate the brand new Jefferson Davis Presidential Library. Late March.
Did you know that? Hey, put this here. This ridiculous piece of shit right here. It's over. This boy's a socialist. He needs to be dragged out and